Let's set aside for a moment the fantasies of becoming a billionaire. They are elegant distractions, beautiful stories that sell hope but don't solve the real problem. Today is not about extreme wealth. It's about intelligent survival. It's about moving from a point where life controls you to a point where you start having choice. There is a number that almost no one respects, yet it defines everything. It's not 1 million, it's not 10 million, it's a small number, almost ridiculous depending on where you look. $20,000. If you say this in certain environments, people will laugh. At sophisticated tables, that amount disappears in a single night. But that reaction only proves the point. Those who have already left the base have forgotten how it works. Those who never left still don't understand the game. This number is not important for what it buys. It's important for what it prevents. It doesn't build wealth. It removes fragility. And removing fragility is the first real step toward any form of freedom. There is a concept in physics called escape velocity. For an object to leave Earth's gravity, it must reach a specific speed. In the first moments of launch, energy consumption is brutal, far greater than at any other stage of the journey. That's because it's fighting the strongest gravitational pull and the densest atmospheric resistance. Once it breaks through that layer, everything changes. Effort drops, movement becomes natural. Financial life follows the exact same pattern. The range between 0 and 20,000 is your maximum gravity. It's not growth, it's resistance. You're not moving forward, you're trying not to sink. Every mistake costs more. Every unexpected event becomes a crisis. Every decision is made under pressure. There is no strategy when survival is the only objective. People like to romanticize the beginning. They say it's where you learn the most. That's not entirely true. You do learn, but you learn under stress. And stress is not a good teacher. It's a limiter. When you live with very little, you don't make optimal decisions. You make possible ones. And that creates a cycle. Imagine someone with $1,000 saved. It sounds like something. In reality, it's not. One single problem, a car repair, a medical bill, a household emergency, consumes half or all of it. This is not a planning issue. It's math. When margin is 0, any variation breaks you. And then the invisible cycle begins. You avoid preventative expenses because you can't afford them. Later, you pay more for the consequences. You buy cheap and replace often. You pay fees because you don't meet minimums. You miss payments and pay interest. Each small disadvantage compounds. It's not one big failure. It's many small, constant pressures. This is the gravity of poverty. In this state, there is no real investing. That's the part most people ignore. They talk about stocks, crypto, compound interest, but when the base is 0, the return is irrelevant. Doubling a small number is still small. The mental effort doesn't justify the real impact, and that creates frustration because it feels like you're doing everything right, but nothing changes. That frustration leads to worse decisions. You start looking for shortcuts, high returns, fast promises, because the slow path feels useless when the starting point is low. And this is where most people fail, not because they lack effort, but because they lack structure. At this stage, the goal is not to multiply money, it's to accumulate mass. It's to reach the point where the game changes its nature. 20,000 is not wealth, it's minimum stability. It's the first moment when life stops being a sequence of emergencies. When you reach that number, something shifts, not outside, but inside. Externally, nothing impressive happens. You don't look richer, your life doesn't turn into a movie, but internally the pressure drops, and that changes everything. This is the birth of what I call refusal power. Most people think the problem in the job market is lack of skill. It's not. It's lack of margin, lack of time, lack of the ability to say no. Without that, there is no negotiation, only compliance. Put two people in the same situation, same salary, same role, same competence. The only difference is that one has no savings and the other has 20,000 set aside. When an unfair demand appears, the response doesn't depend on personality, it depends on position. The one without savings enters survival mode. The brain doesn't analyze, it reacts. The potential loss, the job, is too large, so they accept, even against their will, not because they want to, but because they need to. The one with savings sees the same situation differently. There is no urgency, there is space. That space allows evaluation, it allows refusal, it allows negotiation, not because they are braver, but because they can absorb the consequence. This completely changes the power dynamic. Freedom doesn't come from money itself, it comes from the absence of urgency. There is an even deeper impact. Constant scarcity occupies your mind. Financial stress is not just emotional, it's cognitive. It reduces your ability to think long-term. It reduces clarity. It reduces decision quality. When you don't know how you'll pay your next bill, your brain doesn't think in 5 years. It thinks in 5 days. That limitation affects everything. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of mental space. With a minimum reserve, that noise fades. You no longer have to solve the immediate problem all the time, and that frees capacity. You start seeing more clearly, planning better, acting with precision. This is one of the most underestimated effects of money. It doesn't increase your intelligence. It removes interference. And for the first time, you can play the real game. But this point is also dangerous because getting here requires discipline, staying here requires awareness, and growing from here requires strategy. Before this, everything was force. Now direction begins. And this is where most people make the fatal mistake. They confuse relief with victory. After years of saving, resisting, sacrificing, there is finally a meaningful amount stored. That creates a sense of achievement. The brain wants reward. It wants compensation for past effort. And then temptation appears. It doesn't look like a mistake. It feels deserved. You think now you can relax, that you can spend a little, that you can upgrade something. After all, you've made it. But this is exactly where the game tests you, because that money is not the end, it's the beginning. If you consume that capital, you don't go back to zero. You go back worse, because now you've experienced comfort and lost discipline. And without discipline, the second climb is almost impossible. That's why this point acts as a filter, not technical, psychological. Many people reach it, few pass through it. The difference is not how much they earned, it's what they do after earning it. If you understand that this money is not for consumption but for structure, your trajectory changes. If you treat it as a reward, you restart the cycle. At this stage, money is a seed, and seeds are not meant to be eaten, they are meant to grow. This is the central distinction. From here, the game changes its nature. It's no longer about escaping, it's about building. And building requires patience, and patience requires vision. And most people are still trapped in the short term. That's why even after reaching this point, many don't move forward. They stop exactly where they could begin. From the moment you understand that 20,000 is not a prize but a base, the game stops being emotional and becomes structural. Now it's no longer about brute effort but intelligent leverage. And that begins with a simple but rare shift. Stop chasing the extraordinary and start respecting the predictable. Most people want rapid multiplication because they still carry the memory of scarcity. They still think like someone trying to escape zero, even when they are no longer there. This is a silent mistake, because the behavior that gets you out of the base is not the same behavior that takes you to the next level. Before, you needed intensity. Now you need consistency. And this is where the most misunderstood concept in finance enters: compound interest. Almost everyone has heard of it. Few have understood it. Because understanding compound interest is not knowing the formula. It's accepting the slow start. It's tolerating the absence of visible results long enough for the process to become inevitable. Think simply. If you have $1,000 and earn 10% per year, you gain 100. It doesn't change your life. It's irrelevant. Now think about 20,000. The same 10% generates 2,000. It's still not freedom, but it starts to shift the scenario. Now there is impact. Now there is relief. But the real effect is not in the first year. It's in repetition. Money starts working silently, without emotional effort, without physical exhaustion. It doesn't complain. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't lose focus. It just accumulates. And in the beginning, that accumulation feels too slow to take seriously. That's why many quit. They want immediate change. They want quick validation. But this game does not reward speed. It rewards endurance. There is a point where the curve changes, not because you did something different, but because you waited long enough. Growth stops being linear and starts to feel accelerated. And when that happens, people call it luck. But it's not luck. It's disciplined math. But there is a prerequisite, and almost no one explains it clearly. Compound interest requires critical mass. Without a minimum base, the effect simply doesn't show up in a meaningful way. That is why 20,000 matters, not for its absolute value, but because it allows the process to start making sense. Before that, investing is symbolic. After that, it becomes functional. But even then, investing alone is not enough, because although capital begins to work, it is still small compared to your ability to generate active income. And this is where the second engine comes in. If the first engine is capital, the second is you. Most people completely underestimate the return of investing in themselves, because this type of investment doesn't show up clearly on a chart. It doesn't appear as a monthly percentage, but in practice, it is the most powerful one. When you invest $1,000 in the market, you expect a return. When you invest $1,000 in skills, you change your earning capacity. That difference is structural. A good financial investment might return 10% per year. A good skill investment can double your income, and this is not rare, it's common. But this is only possible when you have room to fail, when you are not dependent on immediate results to survive. That is exactly what 20,000 buys. It buys time, and time is the most underestimated asset that exists. Time to learn something new, time to test paths, time to fail without collapsing. Without that, you don't take intelligent risks. You only avoid risk, and avoiding risk constantly keeps you stuck. There is an important distinction here. Risk is not the same as gambling. Gambling is when you don't control variables. Intelligent risk is when your downside is limited and your upside is significant. Learning a new skill, starting a side income, exploring a new path, these all carry risk, but it's asymmetric risk because the cost is controlled while the potential return is large. This is the kind of game you can only play once you've left survival mode. And when this game is combined with invested capital, it creates a dual engine effect. One grows slowly and predictably. The other can generate jumps. Together, they accelerate the process. But while this is happening, there is a constant danger, the same one that pulls most people back, the return to consumption. As pressure decreases, desire increases, not from necessity, but from comparison. You start looking around, people spending, showing, living what appears to be a more comfortable life. And then a quiet question appears, why not me? This is the most critical moment, because now you have the means to consume, and that makes the decision harder. Before, you didn't spend because you couldn't. Now you shouldn't spend, but you can. And that changes everything. Forced discipline disappears. Conscious discipline begins. Without it, all progress dissolves. Because consumption at this stage is not neutral. It directly competes